Now both Daniel and John, who lived many hundreds of years after Daniel, both saw the beast with 10 horns. Daniel, of course, didn't see the 7 heads that John saw, and John didn't talk about the little horn, which is a representation of the coming Antichrist, which Daniel saw. So again, Daniel saw forward to the end, formation of this system called the beast, which was a virus and a code poured out on the world. And John saw the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The fact of the matter is that both saw the 10 horns, which was the completion of the system, and eventually, the Antichrist takes control of that system. But the 10 horns have been mysterious for the last 30 to 40 years. In the 1960s, Hal Lindsey wrote a book called The Late Great Planet Earth, in which he tried to identify the 10 horns as the 10 members of the European Common Market. Well, since that time, the number of members of the Common Market has grown well beyond 10, and so his theory has been kind of squashed. But a number of years ago, the Club of Rome met and determined that there should be 10 federated regions around the world that would serve as economic centers of the world. And most likely those 10 federated regions, which cut the world up into 10 parts, are the 10 horns on the beast. Well, we shall see as time unfolds if that holds to be true or not. Most likely it's true, and they will work in conjunction as clearinghouses for the mark of the beast, which is a world economic system based upon a new way of transacting business without currency or gold or silver. It'll be a computer mark of some sort, probably with a radio frequency identification capacity, which is to transmit binary codes. We're seeing that come on the scene now, possibly next year in 2009, with a new identification card that has a RFID chip in it. And we'll wait to see how that transpires. But that would be one of the last steps towards the ultimate, which is the mark of the beast. Now, we see this beast now, which is a virus explained as a symbolism, a code. And John saw this on the island of Patmos around 90 A.D. And as we look through history, we can see it unfolding over hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of years. So the average person wouldn't see this as a virus. They wouldn't even notice it. They wouldn't understand history or how this all works together with the spiritual world. But it is unfolding just as the symbolism explains it would. And it's important as we study this first beast, which is, like I said, a virus and a code, and unraveling it so that we can get to the meaning of the second code, which is connected with this beast. And that second code is called the false prophet in Revelation 13:11. And I'm going to go into that as we move forward now. Now, as we move forward and discuss other codes that were designed by Lucifer, it's important to understand that this first code, of course, is a system that began with the Pharaonic era, moved all the way through time to the present. And this second code that we're going to be dealing with works in conjunction with this beast system, and it is quite different in its appearance, the symbolic form from the first beast. The second beast looks like a lamb, it speaks like a dragon, it has 2 horns, and accomplishes great miracles or signs and wonders. And it works with the same authority, legal power, as the first beast. And so it's important that we understand to some degree the meaning of this second beast, because it comes at a time that brings to a completion this satanic system and this world ruled by Lucifer. And so we're going to get into this second code here, which has been called in the Christian world the false prophet. In fact, I think it's even mentioned that way in the Bible. So we want to try to understand the meaning of this second code and see how it fits with the way life is unfolding, the way history is coming to its conclusion now, because it was written long ago by Lucifer. Now, when you go back in time and you look at, for example, the Pharaonic era, which was began about 3000 BC, the pharaohs had tremendous political power and tremendous control over the people they ruled over. In fact, the power was so great they were able to commandeer all the people to build the pyramids. This is really an amazing thing, that all the people were subject to the sovereign, and he ruled over them, and they did what he wanted them to do. Now, as you move through time, and you come to the time of about 1000 BC, we come to the time of David, and there was an interesting thing that happened to this sovereign, King David of Israel. Now, before I get into that, I want to say this one more time. Solomon, who was David's son, said some amazing things. He was the wisest man, perhaps of all time, at least when it came to understanding things under the sun. And one of the things he said was that everything that is today has already been, and what is today will happen in the future. So there's a circuitous nature to the codes. They surface over and over again throughout time. When you look at it not in the political realm, but just let's look at it from the standpoint of diseases. You look at the plague that happened to be a catastrophic event in the 1300s, wiped out a quarter to a half of the world's population. The plague has surfaced from time to time throughout history. And just as physical diseases like the flu, every year we seem to have the problem of flu spreading to certain parts of the world's population. It surfaces yearly in the winter months. Well, throughout time, many of the codes that Lucifer wrote have a tendency to come to the surface, where we see glimpses of these manifestations of issues that seem to surface over and over again throughout time. Now, during the time of David, in light of the whole concept of the satanic nature of wanting to lord it over men, we see in the life of King David, when he became truly entrenched in his kingship, that he decided to number Israel. Now, he was warned against doing this by his generals. They said this is not a good thing to do. And David was concerned with numbering Israel because he was motivated to know who was under his authority. And he wanted to know what kind of power he wielded in light of the labor force that was available to him to extend and control his kingdom, the same way the pharaohs did it, although this wasn't recorded in history. Now in the Bible we find King David doing something that was very satanic, because when you reduce humans to numbers, you dehumanize them. And David wanted to understand and know what his power was and how much of the people's labor he could count on for all kinds of business deals that he would make with other countries. So this course brought a great judgment upon him, but the point we're trying to make here is even as far back as 1000 BC, we see this tendency of a sovereign, even though he was a great man, falling into this satanic nature and trying to reduce people to numbers for the sake of understanding how much of their labor he could control and count on. If you look through time to the time of Christ, this was similar to what Herod did when he was asking for the people to come to Bethlehem to register for the census. Mary and Joseph, they had to come to Bethlehem to register for a census. Herod wanted to know the same kinds of things that David was interested in knowing, and that was what kind of labor force is underneath my power and my control, my legal power. And then if we look through time, all the way to the time of the World War II, Hitler did the same thing. And specifically, he did it with the Jews. These were forced labor camps where people were tattooed with a number. So we see throughout time this tendency to reduce humans to numbers, and for the purpose of understanding what kind of labor potential exists in the people. Now, in the era of the Nixon presidency, he did something not quite as grotesque as that, but what he did was he actually took us off the gold standard. Now, gold in history has always been a store of the value of labor. You know, in the old days, if you worked for a day, you'd get, like a quarter of silver. And that was equivalent to a day's wage. Maybe it was a little bit more or a little bit less, or maybe they've even paid you in gold going far back. But the metals, gold and silver, were always used as a store of value and a payment for labor. So labor was condensed into a medium of exchange. And so this is really interesting as you look at what's happening today in the world's economy, what's happening with money, paper currencies, gold and silver. All of these things have historic connections to labor. And so in the final analysis of what goes on in the beast system, there's going to be some kind of change from traditional stores of value to a whole new concept in how people are numbered, how they're consolidated, how they're placed into kind of an inventory database, and then how they're able to transact and do business in the world.